Excavations in Iraq have revealed evidence of localized flooding at Shuruppak and various other Sumerian cities. A lot of other Sumerian cities display evidence of flooding on a large scale, but they are all from different periods. Modern consensus argues that flooding in the wake of the last glacial maximum are what inspired the ancient flood myths around the world, with the geography of Mesopotamia being drastically changed by the filling of the Persian Gulf after seawaters rose following the last glacial period. Some authors have even postulated that stories of a great cataclysm were ancient cultures' ways of explaining the early Bronze Age collapse and transition to more urbanized societies around 2900 BC. If these texts and stories are to be believed, this was potentially the event which wiped out all of the slave humans who, up till this point, according to Sitchin, had still been mining gold or slaving away at other tasks which the Anunnaki commanded. It was during this shift that the Anunnaki retreated from their earthly settlements, with Enki's last act being to support humanity and help us to survive the flood and shift in consciousness so that we could resettle and begin inhabiting the earth, this time without being isolated to any particular area, free to roam and inhabit the earth as we desired. It is believed that about 6,000 years later, they delivered information and wisdom of their existence to humanity through a messenger, seeding ancient Sumer with knowledge of their species and human origins. Curiously, the legend of a massive flood is actually not exclusive to Middle Eastern mythologies, but in fact is written about all over the world in countless different ideologies and cultures. In China, we see a story of a great flood that supposedly lasted for 2 generations, wiping out everyone save for those who moved to live in the mountains. In Central and South America, there are a number of ancient myths of floods wiping out almost all of the people, save for a scarce few who repopulate the earth. And as we looked at, there are even several stories across Mesopotamia, which all share a similar common thread. We actually don't have enough time in this singular video to explore all of the flood myths of the world, because we would probably be here for hours just on that one topic alone. Generally, in most of the flood stories, it is the gods or a specific god who brings the flood to wipe out humanity, either to start over or because we have displeased them somehow. For those interested in really diving into the various accounts, however, Graham Hancock has explored the world flood myths to an exceptional detail in his book, Fingerprints of the Gods, which again, we highly recommend reading. And speaking to this, there is an even more prevalent theory that brings all of these stories together and describes similar global events in history when the ice caps melted and the water rose tremendously, wiping out all, or most, of life. Geologists agree that by 8000 BC, the great Wisconsin and Worm ice caps had retreated. The Ice Age was over. It has been postulated that the deluge myth in North America may be based on a sudden rise in sea levels caused by the rapid draining of prehistoric Lake Agassiz at the end of the last ice age about 8,400 years ago. However, the 7,000 years prior to that date had witnessed climactic and geological turbulence on a scale that was almost unimaginable. The few scattered traces of surviving humans must have led lives of constant terror and confusion, with periods of time filled with violent floods and climatic changes. The bulk of the animal extinctions took place between 11,000 and 9,000 BC, when there were violent and unexplained fluctuations of climate, which geologist John Imbrie has called a climatic revolution. Now, there is a very interesting theory about exactly how this whole thing took place and what it means for us today. To share this theory, we've borrowed a clip from our friends at Gaia from one of our favorite series, Ancient Civilizations, featuring Graham Hancock, Greg Braden, and a ton of other experts as they help to decipher the clues of the ancient past. What's especially remarkable about this theory is that it aligns very well with the story of Atlantis and an absolutely massive shift of ages.
Let's first of all consider the world during the Ice Age. Everybody's heard of the Ice Age. What was the Ice Age? The last Ice Age set in about 125,000 years ago. And it saw the buildup of giant ice caps, primarily on top of North America and on top of Northern Europe. Exactly why the Ice Age happened is still a subject that scientists argue about. But it's not in dispute that an ice cap 2 miles deep sat on top of North America and a huge area of Northern Europe, that same 2 mile deep ice cap. It reaches its maximum extent about 21,000 years ago. The temperatures are warming almost actually to modern levels, and the ice is beginning to disappear. And then suddenly, 12,800 years ago, really suddenly, literally overnight, everything changes, and the Earth is plunged back into a massive deep freeze. This is a time of huge extinction of species are wiped out. The new evidence that is providing coherent sense to this is called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. And it has been put forward by a large group of mainstream credentialed scientists. And what they've said is that they have found evidence which suggests the Earth was hit by several fragments of a comet. For a long time, the comet was out there. It was probably a very spectacular visual presence, but it wasn't hitting the Earth. But 12,800 years ago, by which time that comet had begun to fragment, had broken up into lots of fragments. And the estimates are that 4 of those fragments, 4 large fragments, hit the North American ice cap. It's literally beyond imagination. That instant of impact would have created so much heat that it would have melted large areas of the North American ice cap and sent the water flooding south. Then within a matter of days or weeks of that release of water, the freezing temperature has begun, and there's no more release of water. The world goes dry at that point and into a very deep, dark, frozen period accompanied by animal extinctions. The Younger Dryas lasts for 1,200 years. It lasts from 12,800 years ago to 11,600 years ago. And then something else really weird happens. The Earth's been in a deep freeze. Suddenly, 11,600 years ago, you get a second massive pulse of meltwater into the world ocean. One very strong suggestion is that the Earth intersected again with the debris stream of the same comet, and that there were further impacts 11,600 years ago. But those impacts were not on ice. Those impacts were entirely oceanic. You get big comet impacts in an ocean, and what you're going to get, as well as extraordinary tidal waves, what you're going to get is a massive amount of water vapor thrown up into the upper atmosphere. And that water vapor creates a greenhouse effect, which accounts for the very radical warming of the Earth. It has to be rather intriguing that that's the exact date, 11,600 years ago, that Gobekli Tepe is founded. And it has to be even more intriguing that 11,600 years ago is the exact date that Plato gives us for the destruction and disappearance beneath the flood of the ocean of the lost civilization of Atlantis.
This hypothesis is further backed up by an independent study featuring over 20 authors, which finds evidence for meteor or comet impacts on 4 different continents: North America, South America, Europe, and Western Asia, from about 12,800 years ago, in the form of nanodiamonds, spherules, and melt glass consistent with meteor impact. Randall Carlson is a PhD who incorporated the dating of Gobekli Tepe with geological evidence which suggests global flooding. He wrote that if an impact actually hit and there was a cataclysm, you could easily see how an effect of that magnitude would destabilize the Earth for perhaps 1,000 years or so. It's after this window of time that the Younger Dryas geological records shows an abrupt change in climate that we date Gobekli Tepe.